The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tad Radzinski, and I want to welcome you to our webinar today. Today, we're going to talk about how to communicate, market, and certify your LCA and PCF results. Before we get into the webinar, I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items. So for those of you that have been participating in our webinar series, you know that you do have the ability to ask questions throughout the webinar. And you can do that by going into your control panel and typing them right into the question pane. And we will be answering them throughout the webinar and at the end. The other thing that I would say is many of you have asked questions from the part 1 and part 2 of our webinar series. And those questions have been collected by our team, and you can expect personal emails with answers on your questions in the coming week or so. We have assigned them out to our LCA experts, and everybody's working on getting those responses together now. Also, engagement, we will be asking questions. You're going to be doing some polls. Like I said, type your answers into the question box. And if you have any questions, also put them into the question box. And just so you know, this webinar software, we're not able to do a public chat box. So you're not going to be able to chat with each other during the webinar. However, our team can see every question, comment, and answer, and we will make sure to address that. If you end up having any technical difficulties or whatever, just send a message, into the question box, and our team is here to help you through any kind of technical issues. Also, we will be doing polls. Like I said, we'll be doing several polls, and we'll launch them, and we'll give you so much time to click submit. We want this to be a very interactive webinar. We are going to be doing an exercise today where you can put your answers into the question box, and we will be recording this webinar, which is exciting. So if people aren't able to attend, or if you want to pass this along to someone else, you will be getting the recording within 24 hours of us wrapping up the webinar series. So with that, I'm going to get started into our actual webinar activity as I see people are still logging on. So again, I'm Tad Radzinski, and I'm the president of Sustainable Solutions Corporation. I'm very excited to do webinar number 3 of our series here. And we are going to cover quite a few excellent topics today. We're going to be talking about market drivers. We're going to be talking about a thing that we coined quite a few years ago called Voice of Green exercise. One thing we'll get into is, as part of StageGate, many stage gates are driven by voice of customer. So we're going to expand upon that. We're going to show you some examples of how people are marketing life cycle assessments and product carbon footprints. We're going to talk about why external competing LCAs are not comparable. I want to make sure that's clear, because people can do internal LCAs and can do comparisons and analyze that, but from an external competing product LCAs, what the challenges are around that. Then we're going to go into some things that we developed as part of our sustainable product innovation process. I know we did that webinar last week around setting up a good sustainable marketing plan to make sure that you're communicating and educating your customers. And then we're really excited to have Michelle Bonanno from GreenCircle Certified. She's the Vice President of Operations and Certification Officer, and she's going to be talking about some of the third-party certifications that are available to basically get third-party verification for your product optimization and operations claims. So we're excited to have Michelle today. With that, I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to start talking about market drivers. I know that we have talked about some of these, but I want to circle this back around to why it's so important to market and communicate the different things you're doing with your life cycle assessments, your EPDs, and your product carbon footprints. So if we look at where many of you are on here, because obviously you're doing life cycle assessments, you're developing EPDs, you're developing product carbon footprints, or you're thinking about doing those, and you're trying to figure out, well, what is driving this? And most of you definitely are coming from companies that have established sustainability programs, or you're developing your sustainability programs. And if we think about why sustainability is really important to you, there's many reasons, right? But some things are definitely like to stay competitive or go extinct, to meet corporate sustainability and social responsibility goals, thinking about product stewardship, investor demands. We're seeing a huge push from the financial community about driving sustainability. We're also seeing government regulations. And then I can guarantee if you do sustainability right, you can definitely save money and actually turn it into a revenue generator by working on optimizing your operations. We talked about doing sustainable operations assessments and reducing energy and water and waste and material losses and how all the money you can save there. So these are all really important things about sustainability, but really one thing we have to look at is many of you have customers that are demanding sustainability from you as an organization, whether it's the consumers you sell to, the architects and designers you're marketing your building products to, the different areas that you're selling your products into, government infrastructure projects or government construction projects. There's so many different drivers. So really important as we go through, we're going to talking a lot today about customer demand and how important it is. I do want to emphasize also when we're talking about third-party certifications and making sure you're communicating and documenting how you've done your LCAs and EPDs and product carbon footprints, that the federal government under the Inflation Reduction Act is actually focusing over $100 million right now on developing a program to label construction materials and products that have substantially lower levels of embodied greenhouse gas emissions based on their EPDs. And they're also really focusing on enhanced standardization and transparency for EPDs. So we know that in the building world, it's a big deal. We also saw in our previous webinars that there's states that are passing embodied carbon legislation around certain products and materials. Definitely, we're seeing concrete and glass and steel and wood and cement and asphalt and all kinds of different things that are getting focused on in these state requirements, which means that companies have to do EPDs. They have to disclose their environmental carbon footprint of their products, and they also have to be making sure that their products are below a certain threshold. That's what that new certification program is that EPA is looking at. I know that our company has provided extensive comments to the request for information from EPA on that because it is a very important aspect that has to be focused on. The other thing we know is in Europe, there's a lot going on. The European Green Deal is driving more environmental product footprints and more disclosure and transparency and all kinds of things. So there's just a lot going on from the government perspective. Another big thing is, I don't know if anybody's on here from that makes building products or will be attending Green Build next week. That's the United States Green Building Council hosts a big conference called Green Build. It's going to be in Washington, D.C. And next week, they're unveiling a new LEED standard called LEED version 5. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Right now, there's two standards that are out, LEED v4 and LEED v4.1. v4.1 is going to stay in draft. But what's really interesting is this new LEED standard is really focusing on multi-attribute optimization of products and buildings and looking at it from that perspective. We're expecting to see the first draft for public comment coming out next week. And this is really interesting because it is pushing more optimization, like we talked about last week in our second webinar when we were talking about sustainable product innovation. Optimization of reducing embodied carbon, looking at circularity, optimization from the perspective of reducing certain chemicals in your products and disclosing those transparently. So there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on with LEED v5, which is exciting to me. In fact, you're going to see when Michelle talks today about some of the certifications they do, how those certifications can actually meet the requirements of LEED v5 in terms of showing total transparency. If you remember, we looked at what makes a sustainable product last week pretty heavily, and we talked about how multi-attribute approach is really important because there's not one single attribute that typically makes a product sustainable. You have to look at many. The other thing that I know is this is a real example of specifications that are coming out. This is just basically Division 72 for thermal insulation from CSI divisions, but really we're seeing many architects and designers putting together specifications that are requiring the disclosure of, number one, EPDs, but also if you have done embodied carbon optimization, disclosing that, or if you've done a multi-attribute label, to disclose that, as you can see highlighted in yellow here. So this is just one example of what the architects and designers are putting out to the world. So this is driving building product companies to say, oh my gosh, how are we going to meet this? And we better start communicating to these architects and designers that we actually have products that will meet these things. So this is why we're talking about how to market this today, getting that information out to the right people and letting them know that your company has the EPDs, your company has the optimization documents, the third-party certifications that are required to be specified in various buildings. The other thing we know is, and in fact, Michelle's going to talk about this example in a little while when she's talking about a company that has certified. We're seeing that many companies, especially consumer products companies, are actually doing life cycle assessments or putting together product carbon footprints, and they really want to understand how their products can meet consumer expectations. You can see here, this is a great graphic here from the Shelton Group. They're awesome. It's a company that's been doing basically consumer behavior analysis and surveys for over 20 years to understand what is driving people to think about the products they purchase from an environmental perspective or a sustainability perspective. And what you can see here is many people who are buying things, like all of us, we're looking for certain things. We're looking for products that are better for the planet or the environment, or have recycled content or recyclable, or have reduced waste, or they have basically are reducing carbon footprint, or minimizing climate change, reducing energy use, etc. So the important thing to note here is this is a great thing we're going to talk about in our Voice of Green exercise, is understanding what are consumers, what are our customers thinking about when we're trying to communicate to them on the things they want from our products. So doing a life cycle assessment, or conducting a product carbon footprint, can give you insights into what life cycle stages are the big impact drivers, what raw materials you're using, what stages, like your manufacturing operations, that you can change to reduce some impacts. So this is really important information when you're going through your sustainable product innovation activities, and we're going to actually talk about this when we do the Voice of Green exercise. The other thing I want to bring up is the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States. That is a group that really focuses on green claims. They basically have put out the green guides back in 2012, and they really do enforce. They actually have earmarked money to do enforcement for companies that are putting out greenwashing or false claims. And I'm not going to read these, but you can see some examples here of how the FTC is bringing cases against different folks that are marketing claims, talking about how, in this particular case, this was a company that was claiming recycled content, and they really didn't have as much recycled content as they were talking about. The big thing that we are going to hear about today from Michelle is the importance of substantiation and evidence in you making a claim. And that's what a third-party verifier is going to do. They're going to verify that you have the documentation, the substantiated information, the evidence, and that's the beauty of an LCA or doing a product carbon footprint or an EPD. That is your substantiation, your evidence for certain claims you can make. The other thing we have seen is that with these lawsuits that are coming out from the Federal Trade Commission, a lot of times companies are just unknowingly making a claim and they're getting dinged for it. And these can be fines of millions of dollars. So really important to pay attention to that. We do know that like I said, the green guides were issued back in 2012. You can see here, these are all the different areas or single attributes that they focus on. And the one that I want to focus on here or point out is the interpretation and substantiation of environmental marketing claims. There's very specific guidelines from the Federal Trade Commission on how you do that. I know that our companies just submitted comments to the FTC. They were seeking public comment for potential updates to the green guides. And the one thing that I see them really focusing on is there's so much going on with people talking about, oh, we're using carbon offsets, or we're doing different things to reduce our carbon footprint. They're going to put a lot more emphasis and focus on that, because some of these claims around those are maybe not 100% in alignment with existing standards. We're also seeing activity around more focus on general sustainability claims was some of the topics that the FTC was asking us to comment on. The other thing that just came out in Europe is the European directive of, basically the Green Claims Directive is what the summary of this would be. And this is all about, notice the words here, substantiation and communication of explicit environmental claims. This is very similar to the Federal Trade Commission activity. And what we're going to see is that European Union is going to start to regulate the fact that anybody making claims is going to most likely have to have a third-party verification of that claim before they make it. They won't be accepting just, an internal claim or a claim right from a company. So a lot coming down on this. We're seeing, different crackdowns, a lot of things going around to make sure there's no deceptive or false claims going out there in the marketplace in both US and Europe. All right, so we're going to launch our first poll. So again, for those of you that have not been on our first two webinars, we're looking for your participation in these polls. Question is, are you using sustainability messaging in your marketing content right now? So we're trying to see what people are doing, just get a feel, because we're going to do this Voice of Green exercise in a minute here. So everybody's voting. We're going to give it a few more seconds. Keep up the great work. We got about 50-some% voting. Let's try to get up to 75% or so. Let's keep voting. Doing great. Looking at the poll. So are you using sustainability messaging in your marketing content? All right, we're seeing good response rate here. A little bit longer. All right. Awesome. A little more. I think we can give it one more second. Let's close that poll. So about 86% of you said yes, you are using sustainability messaging in your marketing content, which is great. About 14% said no. So what we're going to do today, for those of you that are doing it, we're going to give you some tips and ideas on how you can maybe optimize or enhance your messaging. And for those of you that aren't doing it, we're going to give you some insights on how best to do it and some of the key tricks that we've learned ever since we started doing our sustainable product innovation, LCAs and EPDs, all the way back in 2007, 2009, 2010 timeframe. All right, so let's dive in here. This is our interactive exercise of the day. We call this the Voice of Green exercise. And really what we're looking to do here is we want to understand customer requirements for sustainable products and operations. So if you remember in our webinar last week, we talked about the stage gate process or the new product development process. Often a stage gate process or new product development process is driven by a marketing team that's listening to what we call voice of customer. What is the next new product, or what is the modification that we need to do to a product based on what we think we can sell, what the market wants, what our consumers want, what our customers want. So usually in voice of customer, there's questions being asked is, how does our product compare to competing products? Does it have the same product features, aesthetic, any updated technology we should be thinking about? What is the cost of the product? That's usually a big one, right? So the marketing team's out listening, they're hearing all this, and they're trying to figure out what is the next thing we should be doing as a company to make sure we keep our competitive edge and we can keep selling our products. We were recently doing some work for a company that was selling products into big box stores for home improvement. And their big thing was they were starting to lose shelf space because there was other competing products that customers were buying in more volume. So they were seeing they had to evolve there. So that's some of the things you'd be looking at. What's the quality? How long does the product last, et cetera? And how does the product function as advertised? Like, these are key questions. So now what I want to do, and I want you to go into the question pane here. I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to Voice of Green, which is besides, you know, product cost and performance and all that kind of thing, what are the things you're hearing from your customers, or what are the things you should be asking of your customers based on your products or your company or whatever you're selling or doing that would help you to understand that market, to do a better job of making sure that you're considering all aspects in the new product development process, as well as being able to communicate that. So if we could just go in, if you could just go into the question pane and start putting in some things that you might be asking. I want to see what the audience is thinking here. Or what are you already asking of your customers? So feel free to dive in here. So we got costs. What else you got? I'm going to prime the pump here, give you one. So one might be, does your product have an EPD or PCF? Here's some coming in. What is the product footprint? Is it disclosed? That's a great one, and that aligns very closely here. What would make your job easier? What is the PCF in the LCA? What is important to them? Are they trying to lower PCF? Excellent. Keep them coming in. This is awesome. How do I dispose or recycle of it? What lead credits? Oh, awesome. I know we have that one on here. Here we go. What is the product carbon footprint of your product? All right, we got great interaction here. Keep it coming. Awesome stuff. Chemicals of concern, red list. What are your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions? Excellent work. Keep them coming. How important is it for you to sell shingles? Does your client value the occupant experience? That's a really good one. Excellent opportunities here. Voice of customer, good stuff coming in. Thank you. What is the energy consumed? Have you completed an LCA for your products? Do you have sustainability benefits, cost savings? What is your roadmap for carbon neutrality? These are excellent. Great work. Thank you all for putting these in here. How circular is your product? Oh, these are awesome. Excellent work. So yes, so you're getting, this is exactly what we want people to be listening for. We actually introduced the Voice of Green concept back in about 2010 or 11 in the sustainable product innovation process. Remember from last week, we were talking about how it's really imperative when you as an organization are working with your new product development teams, that they are usually very cross-functional teams. You're going to have people from R&D, engineering, logistics, purchasing, but also the marketing and sales teams are involved. And these are the things you want to be checking in. Does your product contribute to lead credits? Is your product third-party certified? Is your product made with recycled content? So this is all the things of Voice of Green we want to be listening to. So these are awesome, excellent answers, and thank you all for your participation. So the key here is, when we're thinking about this and what we learned, is you have to balance things, right? So if I go to my next slide here, you can see obviously voice of customer, there's going to be key things you're always listening for based on standard product offerings. But on the Voice of Green side, we want to make sure we're balancing. That's why we show this scale here, that we're listening to both and bringing that to the table. And this is a really big thing when you're driving your new product development process and integrating sustainable product innovation. You want to be considering these things. So we saw a lot of these items on the right here about, you know, sustainable materials, recycled content. What do I do at the end of life? Does it contribute to green building standards? Is there reduced packaging? Is it actually repairable, upgradable, and exchangeable? All great things that the Voice of Green we have to be listening for. So excellent work on that exercise. Thank you for all the participation there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remember this and we're going to carry this through. So what I want to do now is bring in a couple examples of how we have seen companies marketing their life cycle assessments, their product carbon footprints. We do know that EPDs, environmental product declarations, for many companies that are doing specifically maybe products in the building market, their EPDs they're marketing them in different ways. And so right now we're going to show you LCAs and PCFs. And the reason we're doing this is, if you remember in our first webinar, we talked about the fact that usually life cycle assessments, people don't put a lot of information out about them publicly because there's a lot of top secret information in them and proprietary information. But we are seeing that there are companies that actually are doing just a life cycle assessment or a straight life cycle assessment because they want to communicate product benefits. And we're going to talk about that in a minute here. So there's a company a few years ago that our team worked with, our LCA experts here at Sustainable Solutions did. It's called Soylent, and they actually make a meal replacement drink. It's 20 grams of plant protein. And really what they wanted to do here is they chose not to publish their full LCA report. They chose to communicate the results of their LCA report by doing a blog post. And they were trying to answer questions. What were some of the findings? What is an LCA? Why plant protein? What about our packaging? What's next? And, want to learn more about how the LCA process works. So all these different questions they were trying to answer in a blog, and they provided a series of different things. And in this case, this company did what we call a comparative LCA, which is managed very closely by ISO 14044, that if you're going to make comparative assertions against competing or alternate products, that you have to get a three-party critical review panel to actually review that. And that panel has to be made up of experts that know LCA really well, experts in the particular claim. In this particular case, I think the panel was comprised of an LCA expert, a person who is an expert in nutrition and food, and an expert in agriculture. So when you look at the claims that are made, this is a comparison against, say, the Soylent product against eggs and bacon, or a fast food meal, or a home cooked meal of trout. How did we do that to make sure that it was done fairly and with the best analysis that would allow for communication of this in a fair and transparent manner? So that's where the third-party review panel comes in and did this work. And you can see here they talked about some of the life cycle things they looked at and whatnot. So this is one example of how you can market an LCA. Another example would be work that was done for a company called Syngenta on their Enogen corn. And they basically made their announcement about their LCA through a press release where they put this out publicly, and they were talking about some of the key findings of the LCA. There were some quotes in there from them and folks at here at Sustainable Solutions Corporation. And the thing they identified is this was a study to determine that, with the Enogen corn, that there could actually be less corn grown and fed to dairy cows. And in doing that, the dairy cows would get the same amount of animal nutrition. There was a multi-year, multi-university study to check that, to make sure that it was an accurate claim that could be verified by LCA. And then this one also had a three-party panel of critical reviewers: LCA expert, agriculture expert, animal nutrition expert, to verify the way the LCA was done to make these claims. But basically what the findings were, that by using the Enogen product, you could feed the animals less, there was less methane generation, there was less impact from growing all the corn, and a lot of other benefits to it. So again, this was an example of how you can market it. There was another one that was done, Hefty Renew. That's an organization. They actually have a program where you can basically take film plastics and you can put them in certain locations into a special bag that is then taken and recovered and managed in a different way, instead of just basically disposing of that in a landfill. And the Hefty Renew program wanted to understand what were the life cycle benefits of managing materials at the end of life in lieu of putting them in a landfill. So there were various analyses done here. Again, a three-party critical review panel looked at this, and the analysis was done to look at alternatives. What if we sent these materials to a cement kiln to be used for energy in lieu of offsetting coal? What if we recovered these film materials and they were embedded into building products or other products? What if these materials went to a waste to energy or a advanced recycling process like pyrolysis? What would be the impacts? So this was done to analyze those aspects of the alternatives and communicate that. So another example here. The next one we're going to show is the product carbon footprint. If you remember in webinar number 1, we showed the Dell Precision Tower 5810 publicly disclosed their product carbon footprint. And I will say it's an estimated product carbon footprint, but what we found really interesting about this is when Dell did this, they basically looked at the fact that in their 2023 sustainability ESG report, they committed to including product carbon footprint in their design decisions, which is really cool. So they're using sustainable product innovation, and then they put out this publicly available product carbon footprint that looks at the estimated product carbon footprint. They do a plus or minus 211 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. But this was a cradle to grave analysis that was done, and it showed how they did their uncertainty analysis and things like that. So this is one way that we have seen this disclosure. So it's really good information, and just to give you some examples how this can be done. And obviously, like I said, EPDs, many companies are marketing their EPDs, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes here. All right, so one thing that we want to talk about here is why external competing product LCAs are not usually comparable without going through a full process like I just talked about. So one thing to remember, what an LCA does not provide and what an LCA does provide. LCAs are not typically looking at material health impacts. So, the LCA is mainly focusing on environmental impacts associated with a product or a process, and not really looking at risk, exposure, hazards, et cetera, that we typically see being disclosed. Usually an LCA is not looking at product performance either, cannot disclose how material change will impact the structure or integrity of a product. And then for marketing content for competitor claims, I want to emphasize this here, an LCA is not intended as sole basis to market environmental superiority to external industry competitors. So again, requires that third-party review panel, has to be apples to apples, requires additional data considerations. There's a lot to it. And the reason for that, and this is what we have in ISO 14044, is usually you have to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Are the functional or declared units the same? Is the reference service life the same? And this is where product PCRs come in for doing EPDs. It's going to make sure that you're looking at the same attributes and the same aspects of the different life cycle. System boundary, geographic boundary, allocation methodologies could be different. The life cycle databases chosen might be different. There could be different softwares. Like, it's been shown that if you run an LCA in Gabi and then you run an LCA in CIMAPRO, you may end up with different results, even if you try to use as many of the same data sets, because Gabi has their own proprietary data sets. And then the life cycle impact methodology could be different. You could be one LCA could be using Tracy, another one could be using CML. So again, this is why these are not comparable, because there could be a lot of variations. And that's why if you're doing a comparative, you typically have to include all the different things you're comparing in the same study and making sure you're keeping all these things consistent. So again, but I want to emphasize here, and you're going to hear this from Michelle, that if you're doing internal LCAs and you're saying, all right, I got my baseline, now I'm going to do product changes in my sustainable product innovation process, and I'm going to redo that LCA, you can absolutely compare that because you're comparing to your own stuff. So that's completely legit. All right, so let's talk about the sustainable marketing plan, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michelle in a few minutes here. So as I said, when we talked about new product development process and stage gate and integrating sustainable product innovation, we knew that the marketing piece was a big deal and we had to integrate it in. So before I do this, we're going to open up one more poll. So let's ask the audience here, what channels do you use most when marketing your sustainable products? Are you using social media, press releases? Are you putting things on your website, any kind of newsletters or direct emails? How about an annual sustainability report? How are you communicating this? Let's get this out. See the panel here. You have a lot of choices. Looks like annual sustainability reports in the lead. Social media is getting a lot of traction. All right, the poll is moving along. We got about 40% voted. Let's keep going. Try to get more votes going. Coming along really well. All right, a couple more seconds here. Let's get a few more. Shoot for 50%. All right, I think we can close that poll. So if we look at the results here, it looks like about 37% are communicating through your sustainability report, 22% web content, 27% social media, then 6% press releases. So it looks like you're using all media. This is great. 52% of you voted. So everybody's going across the board, and it might even be a combination. So thank you for that input there. We really appreciate it. Now, the next thing we want to talk about here is, greenwashing. I mentioned the Federal Trade Commission, the European Green Directive, Green Product Claims Directive that's coming out, all kinds of different things. And basically what greenwashing is when companies are saying something not with full substantiation or evidence or documentation, and they're making a general claim that can be misinterpreted by someone that makes that person think that this particular product or operation is more environmentally friendly. So this is a really big deal. This is what motivated the development of the company GreenCircle Certified back in 2009. And the other thing we also see is other things that are going on is a thing called greenhushing. And that means that a company is choosing to underreport or hide their green or ESG credentials from public view to avoid scrutiny. A lot of times people do that. Everybody thinks that you're going to have really great results and good information when you're doing sustainability, but sometimes your results and the things you're doing aren't great, and you have to tell that. So it's important to be transparent. It's important to be very clear on your communications. So remember, we talked about stage gate process, product innovation. It's really important to integrate your marketing throughout that process. If you notice here, we are definitely looking at cost and then voice of green showing up here. These are all the different stages and gates in a stage gate process. So we typically try to integrate things throughout. And one thing that we have found that's really critical is when you're doing new product development and sustainable product innovation, you want to make sure you have a good marketing plan that combines both your product and brand level activity, basically the structure, how you're structuring it, looking at your marketing plans and your branding plans, brand marketing plans, how they mesh together. But then going back to our exercise, integrating that voice of customer as well as voice of green into the marketing plan. So a couple things that we're going to recommend here is when you're doing your marketing activities, you use your voice of green in parallel with the voice of customer to evaluate what product attributes can contribute to green building standards, or what are you doing as a company that could offer lower embodied carbon or optimized products? And this could be in green buildings, it could be across the board, public purchasing, government purchasing, et cetera. Understanding what the government and customer requirements are for PCF, EPDs, understanding retailer requirements. Amazon's Climate Pledge Friendly program is basically giving a badge to products that have reduced impacts. Wayfair, Shop Sustainability, they do the same thing, which is awesome. Understanding the efficiency of your product, determining your contribution possibly to net zero buildings, looking at your transparency documents, LCAs, EPDs, HPDs, evaluating and using third-party certifications, putting marketing materials together, and then conducting sustainability sales training are all key things that you should build into that marketing plan that you're going to do. We definitely encourage many companies to get third-party certifications. You can see over here, if any of you are doing environmental product declarations, you are technically getting a third-party certification from the program operator. It could be UL, NSF, ASTM, EBU, different folks in Europe as well. But then there's also product certifications like, oh, my product saves energy and qualifies for Energy Star, or I'm using sustainable forested products. I got FSC certification, or Green Guard for low emitting materials. And then Michelle's going to talk about life cycle assessment optimized, communicating how you have been able to reduce impacts of your products. So we talked about communicating sustainable product attributes. And if we look at this, from a marketing perspective, many of you answered this. You're definitely using these different channels and media to get your information out there. One thing we do encourage is that if you are using social media, getting your employees to start to engage and expand that message even more. So maybe you can talk about the fact that you have EPDs or you did a PCF. This example here shows how Assa Abloy was using social media. I think this is on LinkedIn. They're talking about how many environmental product declarations have been verified and published, how many suppliers they've already done direct outreach to in sustainability. things like that. So really good stuff. And then the other thing that we want to talk about is how to publish your EPDs, PCFs, HPDs, or your manufacturer's inventories, etc. So the big question is, where do we publish these things? There are different databases. If you have an EPD or a PCF, and we have a little asterisk here, some of you may not be making your PCFs publicly available, and that's okay. Maybe you just want to tell your customers you have them, but you don't want to put them on your website. That's fine. But you can do these on a company website. We're seeing the majority of companies are posting their information about their EPDs or LCAs or PCFs on their website. There's also program operator databases like UL Spot. We know there's other product transparency databases like Mindful Materials, which is really growing in popularity, Sustainable Minds, Ecomedes. These are all typically for building products, but there are different places you can get your EPDs published. And typically some of the program operators might have a database of the EPDs that they verified. So we're going to do one more poll here. And in this poll, if you remember in our first webinar, we asked you all, have you or your organization done an LCA or PCF before? And about 67% of you said, yes, we have. So the question is, once you did your LCA, PCF, or EPD, did you conduct a training for your sales team on how to communicate the results, yes or no? So let's open that poll. We have some saying yes, a bunch saying no. Got about 17% voted. Let's keep going. Keep voting here. Let's get a good cross section of the group. Really appreciate the participation. Keep it going. Excellent, excellent. I'm going to give it a little more, try to get to 50%. A couple more seconds, All right, about 49%. We can close the poll. About 81% of you have said no, we haven't done the training. So this is a big deal. We really strongly recommend, this is something that our company prides ourselves in. Our team is educating throughout the entire process. If we're doing an LCA or an EPD process, or we're doing a product carbon footprint for an organization, we're educating the teams we're working with. If you remember, we talked a lot about data collection and how we have to interact with multiple people throughout the organization. We're educating them through that entire process. But then at the end, we offer typically a sales training to the marketing and sales teams to teach them what the heck does this LCA, PCF, and EPD even mean, and what can we do with it. And the reason we do that is it gives empowerment to your sales team with sustainability information. It also really helps build their confidence. I know salespeople, they're not going to talk about things unless they feel confident about it. So you want to get them confident to understand not only the process that you went through, but the language and the results of the LCA, PCF, or EPD. It also really helps sales teams to understand the value and how it relates to customer requirements. So if I need to have an EPD to meet a government requirement or a green building standard, that's important to know. And you better be thinking about who you're going to talk to about that. And then it can also provide recommendations on customers for your sales team to target. For example, if there's certain architects and designers that really care about embodied carbon, or there's certain government agencies or certain customers out there, like you're going to see from Michelle talking about different folks that care about sustainability, you'd be marketing to them. So this is a real important aspect. We do this quite often. And if you wanted any more information about this, you can definitely reach out to Nicole or others in our group to learn more about how we effectively do this. So with that, we've got plenty of time here. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to run through third-party certifications and talk about how you can have your claims verified. So Michelle, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Tad. My name is Michelle Bonanno. I am the certification officer for GreenCircle Certified, a third-party auditing company that is focused on the certification of sustainability claims related to products and operations. Today, I will give an overview of the key third-party certifications that demonstrate achievements in decarbonization of products, such as recycled content and life cycle assessment optimized. Third-party certification provides a level of assurance to clients and consumers regarding your sustainability claim, in addition to demonstrating your commitment to transparency by requesting that a third-party certifier review your data and documentation behind your claim. As Tad mentioned, the request for third-party certifications is growing, and having third-party certifications can create a competitive advantage for your products. We also know that third-party certifications are being utilized to fulfill government requirements, can demonstrate applicability toward LEED credits for building products, and can achieve retailer recognition for consumer products. These additional benefits are all attained because of the auditing process that occurred to verify the sustainability claim and achieve that third-party certification. The next two slides are derived from external organizations such as the Shelton Group, who have done a number of surveys over the past 20 years, and they continue to monitor what is driving consumer behavior. You can see in this chart that compares the responses from 2014 to 2020 that there is an increase in the recognition of third-party certifications, which influences the consumer purchasing decisions. This information really identifies that the customer demand for transparency is a key element of customer decision-making, and a competitive advantage can be achieved through third-party certifications. So with that background, I'm going to take you through some of the certifications that can be utilized to highlight the achievements in decarbonization of products. The first one is certified energy savings. Through a reduction in energy usage, there is a reduction in the carbon emissions in the use phase. This highlighted company on this slide was able to use their LCA data to determine which stage of their product's life cycle had the biggest impact. And the result of that LCA was the use phase through the energy consumption. This insight guided the company's decision-making to focus on product improvements that would reduce the impact of the use phase. And then they were able to demonstrate this improvement and receive certification of the energy savings achieved. This improvement not only reduces the environmental impact of the product, but it also provides a potential cost savings for the customers. The next certification type is recycled content of a product. The positive environmental impact of utilizing recycled content is the reduction of embodied carbon in the raw material stage of a life cycle. This is a single attribute that can reduce environmental impacts when the same virgin material is replaced with recycled material. The verification process from the third-party auditor includes reviewing the sourcing and documentation of the usage of this material in the product. And as Tad mentioned in previous webinars, recycled content reduces the extraction, transportation, and processing associated with virgin materials, which then again reduces the carbon emissions of the raw materials in the product's life cycle. The next certification is Life Cycle Assessment Optimized. GreenCircle developed a LCA optimized certification to recognize the significant achievements of reducing a product's life cycle impact to the environment. By completing a product's first LCA, a company can then identify areas for focus for sustainable product innovation during the next phase of the product's development. Then the company would implement these initiatives based on that life cycle data to make the products more sustainable. When this implementation is complete, then the company performs the product's second LCA, and GreenCircle can verify the reductions achieved. For third-party certification of this reduction, the verification steps will ensure that the LCAs are comparable by reviewing the reports and data sets for items such as the goals, the methodology, the functional units, and the boundaries. GreenCircle also collects documentation related to the modifications to verify that intentional steps were taken to reduce the environmental impacts of the product's life cycle. For building products, LCA Optimized can contribute to the LEED v4.1 credits. And for consumer products, this achievement is also a pathway to Amazon's Climate Pledge Friendly program. LCA Optimized certification can also be utilized to communicate externally without disclosing the proprietary information within an LCA report. This slide that we're on right now shows on the left an LCA optimized certificate for this Assa Abloy lock, which achieved a 7% reduction in global warming potential. Tad also briefly mentioned previously this CEF, Certified Environmental Facts, multi-attribute label, which GreenCircle developed to create an easy-to-read label that can display the multiple attributes that demonstrate the positive environmental impacts of both product and manufacturing achievements. For this product, in addition to having the LCA optimized reduction, this product also has certified energy savings, has recycled content, has published material ingredient reports, and in addition is manufactured at a facility that has a number of attributes such as Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions reduction, water reduction, and waste to landfill reduction. In my opinion, as the certification officer, this slide really demonstrates the ultimate goal in decarbonization, which is having multiple attributes that demonstrate the many initiatives taken to decarbonize both your operations and your products. And this CEF label is an excellent communication tool to highlight the sustainability achievements. That being said, GreenCircle does recognize that some companies are in the beginning steps of their sustainable innovation, and perhaps you haven't even completed a full LCA yet, but you are taking steps to demonstrate progress towards sustainability goals and decarbonization. So for that progress, GreenCircle can assess reductions at a single stage in the life cycle. Right now, we are focusing on the raw material stage and the manufacturing stage, where the company has control over these stages and can begin to make improvements while continuing to expand the multi-attribute approach of decarbonization. I'll go to the next slide. Thanks. So this slide has an example of a multi-attribute CEF label that includes a reduction in the carbon footprint of the raw material stage for a product. For this audit, GreenCircle can verify that a material design change was implemented that reduced the associated embodied carbon of that material. An example of this would be switching to recycled content. Next slide is an example of the CEF label that includes a carbon footprint reduction that is attributed to carbon emissions reduction in the manufacturing stage. For this audit, GreenCircle would verify that intentional steps were taken to decarbonize the operations, which in turn reduce the embodied carbon of the product related to this single stage. As a reminder, these are both partial carbon footprint reductions through a single life cycle stage, and GreenCircle can work with any company to identify both product and manufacturing attributes that could be achieved and then displayed on this multi-attribute CEF label. So with that, I thank you for your time and I will return it to Tad.
Thank you, Michelle. That was excellent. I appreciate that oversight of those different certifications. We do have a couple questions for you, and I'm just gonna wrap up the slides here, and then I will pull you back in to help answer these questions. So I just wanted to wrap up here before we go into questions, and I'm seeing more come into the pane. Feel free to put any questions you have in the pane. Homework, we always provide a homework, and this one is going to take a look at helping you to understand that voice of customer and voice of green like we showed you there. This is a nice worksheet you can use to help guide you through that process. And this will be sent to you along with the recording. Also, as always, we definitely have our resources. We have various podcast episodes that can deal with these different topics. We also have our downloadable documents. Feel free to utilize those. And then I do want to thank everybody that's been doing the surveys. These have been so helpful for us to help put together our webinars and the different information that you're asking to hear. And we tailor that based on your feedback. So we appreciate that you dive into this. So I definitely look forward to the last survey of this webinar series that you all fill out. And I do want to point out that we are hosting a Scope 3 Summit that's going to be live and in-person, invitation only in 2024. And we're trying to see if anybody would be interested in attending that. So that is a question on here. If you feel free to answer that. Also, the complete education series is available. All 3 parts are recorded and are available on our website for your access. So with that, let's go to questions. And just a reminder, if you have any specific information you need, you can reach out to Nicole when it comes to any of these topics. So let's dive in here and go back to questions. So Michelle, there is a question here. It talks about, does GreenCircle accept green tariffs, PPAs, RECs, et cetera, as carbon reduction through the manufacturing stage, is the question.
Yes, we do look at those, and we would review certain documentation to ensure that they are the correct RECs and relatable to your manufacturing operations.
Yeah, and I think in most cases, Michelle, if I recall from what you just said, is, there is a detailed verification process that you go through. And in many situations, I think when you're doing that certified carbon footprint reduction for the manufacturing stage, you're also seeing that most companies are doing energy efficiency in parallel with documented energy efficiency activities. Is that correct? And if yes, what are some examples of that?
Yes, that is correct. So we are collecting all of the energy usage for the facility, not just electricity. And then we will evaluate for reductions at the facility, as well as if they purchased, renewable energy. Reductions that we see most commonly in the manufacturing facilities are improved lighting, improved insulation, putting equipment on timers so that there's less runtime when the equipment is not in use. We can also see behavioral changes. So it's more of communication of the staffing of the initiatives to ensure that best practices throughout the facility by all employees, again, such as turning off equipment when it's not in use, or, checking off the lights or turning the heat down.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. And then we have another one here is, can people put the GreenCircle mark on packaging?
That is allowed. We would have a, further conversation with our marketing team to ensure that it's applicable for the product. It would go through a review process within our marketing team. The main requirement for using GreenCircle on packaging is that we did, in fact, audit that product in its entirety. And what I mean by that is if it's made at multiple manufacturing facilities, we would need to assess that information for the multiple facilities.
Okay. And then there's another question here. Where are you seeing manufacturers publishing these certified environmental facts labels?
Really 2 ways. One, we see it many times with our building products. They use it as a communication tool for architects so that they can source their building product. And then it is a pathway for Amazon's Climate Pledge Friendly, dependent upon the attribute. There are 4 recognized attributes by Amazon: recycled content, certified energy savings, LCA optimized, and then a carbon footprint reduction.
And GreenCircle also has a public database with all these labels, correct?
That's correct. So our information is publicly available on the GreenCircle website. And then we also have within that website a Brands You Can Trust page, which gives some additional insight to the achievements of many of our clients.
Yeah, awesome. All right. And then there's, we have one more question here. With so many certificates out there, how do you know which certificates are the ones you can trust and which not to trust? Any insights on that, Michelle?
My recommendation would be to go to the certifier's page and vet out the auditing process. For GreenCircle, we have a significant data request associated with our auditing process. We do many site visits to add an additional level of verification to the claims. And for something like recycled content, GreenCircle not only is collecting data and documentation from the company, but we are going one step further and collecting data and documentation from the suppliers.
That's excellent. And I think also that GreenCircle has been vetted by multiple organizations, including the federal government, United States Green Building Council, et cetera, to verify that they're following acceptable international standards for certification. Is that correct also?
Yes, that is correct. And another example of that is the GreenCircle certification as a pathway to Amazon's Climate Pledge Friendly. Most recently had a very significant auditing process by the Amazon team to allow for GreenCircle to be a pathway to that program.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Michelle. We're at the end of time here. Thank you all who participated. Thank you for all the questions, the activities and whatnot. Please fill out the survey, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars and possibly at our summit next year in 2024 on Scope 3. So thank you all again.